which of the multitude of NBA draft numbers that you've heard from me over the last 10 days are garbage, and which actually tell a story, according to Locked on NBA Big Board's Leif Thulin. Next on Locked on Jazz.
You are Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
How are you? I'm David Locke. It is the day we find out whether any of this stuff was real. Scoot Henderson's numbers are bad. What do we really think of that? Does it mean anything? We look at the numbers of Isaiah Wong, our favorite little golden sleeper. Is it actually right? In Cason Wallace, the point guard the Jazz need. What about Grady Dick? Are those numbers real? We'll look at Nick Smith and G.G. Jackson and Julian Hood-Sciafino and these guys whose numbers were not good. And my general premise that maybe this draft actually isn't very good. Are Jordan Hawkins, Cam Whitmore, Brandon Miller, and Dariq Whitehead as good as shooters as we actually say they are? We'll all do it with Leif Thulin of Locked on NBA Big Board. As I mentioned, I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider, and this is Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, lots of geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Special thank you to the everydayers that join us Monday through Friday to get this insight and drive this community on YouTube, as well as on all podcasting apps. We are free and available on all podcasting apps and on YouTube. Please subscribe. Please hit the bell button and join in. We greatly appreciate you very much for all of it. Today's show, by the way, brought to you by Game Time. Game Time app. Create an account. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Game Time. Leif Thulin now joins us on the program from Locked on NBA Big Board. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Excited to talk some prospects for my favorite team, and it's always fun when you have a couple cracks at the bat. So we've got prospects that should line up with some numbers and some that I think will not.
I know you've listened to a few of these shows. You have not heard all of them. And by the way, if you haven't heard, Leif is going to be filling in for me throughout the summer. The summer is too big a deal for Utah Jazz for me to go on vacation. However, life, work-life balance, and marriage are too important for me to not go on vacation. So therefore, I will be going on vacation. Leif's going to join us here in late May for about 7 days. He's then going to join us, really walk you all the way up to the draft on Locked on Jazz. So get used to hearing this guy. He does great work. All right, let's start in. We've digested this for about 8 straight shows. Our everydayers are used to it. As you know, I break it up into athleticism, playmaking. We talked about this week. The playmaking, maybe it's not the greatest numbers on pick and roll numbers, shooting numbers, and creating. Let's start with the number 2 pick in many people's mind. It's Scoot Henderson. I get he's in the G League, but he's in the 26th percentile in transition. He's in the 22nd percentile in isolation attempts. He's in the 26th percentile or 44th percentile on pick and roll ball handling. His spot up shooting's okay, 67th. His overall catch and shoot's not okay. It's in the 37th percentile. His unguarded catch and shoots, he went 5 of 17 for the season, I think. And on his overall creating on jumpers, he shot 67 of 184 on jumpers off the bounce. This really the number 2 pick of the NBA draft?
I believe so. I think you watch a guy who's 18, and you mentioned the G League, and I think it's important to contextualize for those who aren't as avid draft followers, is that the G League is significantly better than your favorite Power 5 college basketball program. So, for instance, Brandon Miller was on the Alabama team that was the number 1 overall seed, and he played in the second best conference in America in the SEC. But the G League was 10 times better. Scoot Henderson still scored 18 points a game. He still averaged over 6 assists per game and averaged 5 rebounds a game. I know those are counting stats, so that doesn't monitor efficiency, but it's important to show that he was able to make large contributions right away as the main man playing against grown men, former McDonald's All-Americans. And so I think it's interesting. The thing that does concern me a bit is the transition percentile. That was low, but you see him play and you can't hide from the burst, the crazy strength, and his enormous hands. He's got like Michael Jordan size hands. He looks like he's holding a grapefruit instead of a basketball. And so, yes, the shooting I think is the only one with a valid, like, okay, there's room to improve. But I don't like to look at shooting stats for the G League as much as I do for college, because I think it's such an enormous leap for high schoolers to play professional athletes.
So my overall take here a little bit was that I was really disappointed in the draft numbers from an overall standpoint. And last year's numbers, the players were really good. This year's, the players don't look to be nearly as good. The answer from some people is, well, is this because of all the 6-year seniors and all the COVID? And with college basketball, it's different last year. College basketball was kind of different 2 years ago, too. Is there a chance that the talk of Scoot Henderson and the talk of Victor Wembanyama has covered up the fact that this is actually a really, really thin NBA draft?
I think it's possible. I think a lot of players are going to be reliant on where they land for the roles they get. I don't think there's any guys, or there's fewer guys, I should say, that no matter where they end up are going to be awesome. Like, there's some guys that are inevitable. And I've heard stories of, like, they saw Kobe Bryant work out and he was so young that they were like, I don't want to take a high schooler. But some people, like, tried to beg their front offices because they're like, man, this guy's inevitable. He works so hard. He's got such crazy skill. So I think there's fewer of those type of players than there have been in years past. And I do agree the narrative is aided by the fact that Victor Wembanyama is such a sensation. Like, I vividly remember watching his clips when he was 13 years old and being like, man, this is the guy, the next Gobert. And so that just doesn't happen in draft cycles. So I do think the narrative of this class had a precedent set, and it may have superseded what's the actual quality of the draft class in terms of star power, but I do think this has a draft class with depth.
Okay, so that leads to my second observation that I've made, and a little bit, hey, I used a CBS Sports Line or somebody big board that I don't think was particularly great, frankly, because it cut and paste really well on my Excel spreadsheet. That's really what was important at that point. I listened to Richard Stamen's big board. It's really different. I listened to your big board with Raphael Barlow on NBA Big Board podcast. It's really different than Richard's. I've listened to Raphael's bar. It's really different. Is there a chance that because there is what you're calling depth, but I'm calling thin, that the movement between now and late June in the next 2 months is going to be crazy? That a guy who's at 18 right now ends up 7, or a guy who's 7 right now ends up 18? Do you think that there's going to be more movement in this draft than usual?
That's an interesting question, because I think the kind of the top 4 are kind of set in stone. And then once you get through 5 through 7, I think 5 through 7 is like, there's mostly a delineation between 5 through 7 as opposed to like 8 through 10. But I think once you get past 7, 8 through 15, 8 through 18 could be any sort of order. And I'm not sure the way the draft will go, because there's a lot of players that I think have high risk, high reward profiles, whereas a lot of players that are kind of higher regarded, for instance, a guy like Jarris Walker, who goes to Houston, that the Jazz could perhaps be interested in. The people seem to think he's got a very high floor, and his potential's based largely on offensive improvement, but his floor is based off defense. And then there's guys like Nick Smith Jr., Keontae George, that we'll get to in a little bit, that are very much like, if they hit their offensive ceilings, they can transform a team's offensive style. And so I think there is a bit of variance in the way people perceive it. And it depends who's drafting where and what their specific needs are, more than most drafts, in my opinion.
All right, that sets the picture. We're going to dig into the specific guys here next. Nick Smith, Julian Hood-Sciafino. Is that how you pronounce it?
Jalen Hood-Sciafino.
Jalen Hood-Sciafino. And G.G. Jackson, 3 players whose athletic numbers were super poor. Julian Strother, Bryce Sensbaugh, Kobe Buffkin, Jet Howard, Amari Bailey. 5 players whose numbers looked really good. Their draft position might not be. Is Grady Dick as good as the numbers make him look? Is Cason Wallace the best true pick and roll player out there, as the numbers say? We're touching on those with Leif Thulin as we break it down here on the Thursday edition of Locked On Jazz. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Intercap Lending. Steve Carter's amazing. It's an absolute pleasure for me to be able to tell you about Steve Carter and Intercap Lending, because simply the best customer service I can ever give you. Great loan officer. Steve Carter is our own personal loan officer. And if you We keep getting the emails back every time we send a Locked On Jazz person over there about this is simply the best customer service experience. And I can actually tell you myself that that's true as well. And the reason I can tell you that is because I've used Steve Carter twice. And I think you guys could probably guess I'm a total jelly head when it gets to trying to get these things all together and organized and things like that. And Steve walked me all the way through it. So if you're looking to get a loan done right now, or you're entering into the housing market and you need someone to walk you through what the opportunities are, Steve Carter is here for you. He's over at Intercap Lending. You can reach him at 385-800-8528. That's 385-800-8528. Steve Carter, he's our own personal loan officer at Intercap Lending. Intercap Lending, MLS number 190465. For more information, visit intercaplending.com. Today's show is also brought to you by eBay Motors. I got to tell you what, pretty impressive stuff from eBay Motors when you look at the fact that they have what I think is the key to any car buying situation. And what that is they have the ability, you put in your ride and they have guaranteed fit. That's pretty amazing when it gets right down to it. Guaranteed fit is what you know when you're with eBay Motors. And the reason you know you have guaranteed fit is because they match your car to it, and then that allows you to be able to know that any part you're looking at out of there, I mean, incredible selection, 122 million parts to choose from. You'll know you're in the game. So after all, you want to make sure you bring home the win with the right parts. Nothing's worse than getting the wrong parts when you get home. So get the right parts, the right fit, the right prices, all on ebaymotors.com. eBay Motors, let's ride. Eligible items and exclusions do apply. Thanks very much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. We are rejoined by Leif Thulin of NBA Big Board. Thanks to the everydayers. And you everydayers, you're going to get used to Leif as well. Here on the program, Locked On NBA Big Board is available for you on all your podcasting apps as well. All right, let's get into some of my stuff. You ready? So,
Ready.
Nick Smith, in transition, 19th percentile. Isolation, only 18 attempts, 32nd percentile. Is there a legitimate athleticism worry about Nick Smith?
Yes. This is someone that entering the year was widely regarded as likely the top collegiate prospect. I personally never loved his game because I thought against high schoolers, when he was in high school, he relied too much on skill, whereas I expect my top collegiate pick that is, to dominate athletically. And I felt like his best attributes were touch and tough shot making. And I think that's a tough way to live when you're about 6'3.5", 6'4" guard who relies on floaters rather than get all the way to the rim and step back jumpers. There's very few of those type of players that can really do what he was billed to do as the projected top pick. So I will put this amendment in there. He hurt his knee entering the year and then again during the year. So I think that may have marred a little bit of his athleticism. But that is a considerable risk and something that people will have to consider when thinking about drafting him. So I also pulled some numbers that he's 33rd percentile in isolation, and that's typically a pretty good indicator of someone's wiggle. And that's not particularly good for someone you want the ball in hand for, like that's what you're drafting him for. And he's also average in pick and roll. So you don't necessarily want him as a point guard or your scorer in that sense, based off the numbers. He was very good at catch and shoot, but I would say, yes, your numbers kind of weaseled out some of his weaknesses.
All right, let's get to our next number guy. And he's a little bit of a mixed bag here. And I'm doing him more because this is how highly he was ranked. But Jalen Hood-Sciafino is in the 19th percentile in transition. I mean, that's a crazy low, 79 attempts. In just 16 isolation attempts, he's in the 94th percentile. So you're like, okay. But then you get to his rim. In 80 shots at the rim, he's only in the 31st percentile in rim. This is a guy who is a freshman, 6'6", 213 out of Indiana. Should we be concerned about his athleticism?
I think he is a mixed bag because his game isn't built on speed. He's very, very good at coming off the pick and roll and getting to a spot and elevating. And his mid-range jump shot, I would say, is his greatest strength, which is a bit archaic. But there is a considerable factor that you need to think about when you talk about Indiana in particular. They had a big man in Trace Jackson Davis, who was an All-American, who the offense was ran through. And then their center, they played two bigs. They basically loaded them both up on both blocks. So it was hard to drive. There wasn't much space in this Indiana offense. That said, I do think athletically, he's not someone who's oh my goodness, he's going to soar through the air and dunk it on you type of guy. He's more reliant on guile and using his size. But I think it's effective in the way that he's not, he has kind of a quick twitch is the way I'd put it, but not a vertical pop. He was 27th percentile on layups, and as you mentioned, 31st percentile at the rim. So that meant basically the additional 4% were on dunks. And at 6'6", he only had a few dunks, which is a little bit alarming. That said, I don't want to say he's not an athletic player in the NBA just because I think positional size is so valuable, and he's a true point guard that is 6'6", as opposed to Nick Smith I view as a 2 guard.
Worth noting also, though, his shooting, 22nd percentile in spot up, 32nd percentile in catch and shoot, 25th percentile unguarded catch and shoot. Those aren't great. And those numbers, I buy your whole thing about two bigs. I know nothing about it. I've never watched any of these players yet. I'll do it next week. But that's just catching the ball and shooting it. Like, I kind of don't care who you're playing with at that point.
Yeah, and I think that's a valuable piece of information as well. I would say that his game is more like he's a guy that is dribble, now I'm going to shoot, and he's a rhythm scorer. And it makes me a little worried in terms of if you're relying on him to score. If you're playing pick and roll, I have some confidence in him making good reads and scoring. But I don't see him as a tremendous NBA shooter, but he's one that I know after watching him shoot off the dribble has the stroke to improve.
All right, this is the Tony Jones portion of the show. Tony Jones just isn't a big enough deal. He just dictates a narrative. He has built a narrative around G.G. Jackson out of South Carolina, a 6'9", 210-pound wingish player, 29th percentile in transition, 15th percentile isolation, 45th percentile at the rim on 134 attempts at 6'9". G.G. Jackson, limited athlete. G.G. Jackson unfairly judged by these numbers.
I'd strongly lean towards the latter, the struggling offensive team that was South Carolina making G.G. Jackson's numbers look atrocious when truly I think he's one of the better athletes in the draft. G.G. Jackson came into college basketball at 17 years old. And I know you mentioned in a previous episode, the age shouldn't matter if you're getting a star. And I typically agree with that. But when you look at the team, the mass exodus that transpired at South Carolina leading into this year, that was something that put an enormous burden on someone who's 17 years old, reclassified, was supposed to play at North Carolina, and then got this huge like free reign, and he played against these very good players. And I think a lot of those numbers in terms of like isolation or finishing was poor shot selection as opposed to lack of athleticism. And I think it was a mental issue. I think his shot's significantly better than the numbers show. I've heard from someone, Rafael Barlow's mentioned that he saw him work out and shot the lights out at a workout. I also think that G.G. Jackson, athletically, you watch him run, and there are very few guys in the NBA, much less college basketball, that can run at the size that he is and run up and down the court, cover with amazing strides. And he's got this functional athleticism that I think is very impressive. At 6'9", he creates enormous amounts of space with the ball, with a skilled repertoire. And so I think offensively, he's a guy that I really think will thrive in the NBA with more spacing and just a learning curve, like an ability to not have the burden of the world, the mountain on his shoulders. I think if he gets a chance to sit on a bench, learn, and then accelerate, he could have a star potential. He's one of the guys that I think has the most star potential that's outside of the top 10 in terms of where he's commonly regarded. There
is a extensive podcast you did with Rafael Barlow on a really cool feature Rafael's doing where he brings you guys in, either you or Sam Ferris or Richard Seaman, to sell a prospect to a specific team. In fact, in one of the other ones they did, the agent for the player actually heard the show and was like really moved by it. You sold G.G. Jackson to the Jazz in one of those episodes. People can go back and find it on the Locked On NBA Big Board feed. Why?
I think there's never enough athleticism and length in the NBA. You look at all these teams, what they prioritize, their star players tend to be big wings that can play with the ball and create space and score, and then be two-way wings. You don't see the players like that grow on trees. Like I mentioned, you got to toss out some of the numbers due to context. I think he'll have the steepest growth. Like the possibility for growth is enormous with him. I listened to a podcast that said if G.G. Jackson were in the 2024 class, which is pretty well respected by draft insiders, that he'd be the number one pick, which is the class of high school that he should be in. That means a lot to me. That means that he's a very talented player. I also think the functional athleticism is a point I can't stress enough. He creates space in a way that a 6'9", 17-year-old, now 18 years old, should not have been able to do. Runs like a deer, rebounds tenaciously already. And I think he's just got traits that are undeniable.
He's Leif Thulin, Locked On NBA Big Board. You'll be getting him late May. You'll get him for a lot of June. He's going to host Locked On Jazz and bring it. Is Grady Dick as good as the numbers? We touch on that when we continue here with Leif Thulin. The Thursday edition of Locked On Jazz today is brought to you by Ibotta. Groceries, shopping, getting a little extra something for yourself. Well, you're already doing it, so why not get cash back with Ibotta? Watch your closet grow after purchasing all of the season's latest trends. How about also watching your cash back grow with each purchase with Ibotta? We're always throwing money at something, kids' school supplies, housing projects, so do it. Get money back for yourself for it with Ibotta. I-B-O-T-T-A. Typical basket of groceries, $50. Now a little bit more, so you get more. The average Ibotta user earns $120 a year in real cash back. Ibotta gives you real cash back, not points. Other apps give you points. Ibotta gives you real cash back. So whether it's Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, wherever, get started with Ibotta right now. Ibotta's averaging our listeners $5 for just trying Ibotta by using the code LOCKED when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app and use the code LOCKED. That's Ibotta, I-B-O-T-T-A. In the Google Play or App Store, use the code LOCKED. Today's show is also brought to you by our good friends over at Prize Picks. Are you taking advantage of the great fun of daily fantasy sports each and every day with Prize Picks? All the fun things that are going on in the NBA right now, all the great action. You can get in on the action with all of that each and every night by getting involved with Prize Picks. Prize Picks is easy. You pick 2 to 5 players. You see whether or not you think they're going to go over or under. If you can choose Dylan Brooks misses, you take Dylan Brooks's misses forever, and then you just keep rolling on it and just guess him to miss. No, I'm just kidding. Miss more and more and more. Get involved with Prize Picks, but we got a great deal for you at Prize Picks right now as well for you by being a Locked On Jazz listener. Here's the deal with Prize Picks right now. You get 2 to 6 players. You can get 25% of your money back, but here's the best part. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks gives you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks gives you $50. Don't forget to enter the promo code Locked On and sign up for an instant deposit match of up to $100. Prize Picks. Get involved today. David Locke along with Leif Thulin. Thanks very much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. Locked On NBA Big Board's not a bad choice for your second. All right. Grady Dick out of Kansas. 86th percentile in transition. No isolation numbers. 57th percentile at the rim. 96th percentile in pick and roll ball handling. The single best. Only 37 of them, though. 74th percentile in spot up. 71st percentile in catch and shoot. 96th percentile off the bounce. 41 of 89. The best off the bounce shooter, which is really like the most important offensive skill there is right now. Is Grady Dick this good?
I think some of those numbers are true and some of them are deceptive. The biggest deceptive number there for me is the off the bounce shooting, because his main, and this is because I watched way too much college basketball, as I've been made fun of before. I probably watched, out of Kansas's 34 games, I believe they played, I probably watched 26 of them. And Grady Dick rarely dribbles in. Like when you say off the bounce shooting, people are going to think of Steph Curry. It's very different. He has a pump fake, one dribble, like Bojan Bogdanovic type. Sometimes it's a one dribble pull up inside the arc. Sometimes it's a sidestep three. And he is a very good shooter. His game's predicated around efficiency and taking easy shots leading up to it. So that's a valuable piece. He shoots it very well, and he's got a high release that's fairly quick. That's also a valuable piece. But he doesn't shoot it off movement as much as some of the other top shooters like Jordan Hawkins or Jet Howard, who are the best movement shooters in this class. He doesn't drive particularly well because he's pretty slender in his build. So he gets bumped off his spot in a very physical Big 12. And then I would say that he maximizes his athletic ability. And he is a good run and jump athlete. But I don't think he's like a very functional athlete in the half court. He's a good running kind of finisher in transition. He back cuts and catches lobs, and he rebounds well. But he's not someone that's going to overwhelm you with athleticism, driving in the half court or on defense. I think that's his big deficiency. I think he was easily the worst defender on the Kansas Jayhawks, and that's not something you want to be if you're going to be an NBA wing. Granted, Kansas was the number 1 seed, so I'll put that with context. But if you watch the Kansas film, I don't think it's close who's the worst defender of their starting 5.
All right, let's talk shooters. Grady Dick was in that conversation. The 5 players that came out as the best shooters in the draft for me were Jordan Hawkins, Cam Whitmore, Brandon Miller, and Dariq Whitehead. Jordan Hawkins, many people might have seen when he was with the Connecticut Huskies and winning a national championship, 88th percentile in catch and shoot. Overall, 97th percentile in spot up. That's the best. He and Julian Strother are the 2 best spot up shooters. Marcus Sasser of Houston, actually also in that group of small senior guard. What is Jordan Hawkins the best shooter in the draft?
I think he's certainly got a claim for it. I would say he might be the best shooter, but he's smaller than Jet Howard and Grady Dick and Brandon Miller and Dariq Whitehead for that matter. So I think that factors in as well. I think Jordan Hawkins is the guy who, if you want him off breakneck speed, pin down threes, that's your guy. I think the second place in that type of category is Jet Howard, and I think they're in a league all to themselves. No one else can fly off screens like they do. So I think those are the best 2 shooters in terms of the way I value shooting. I think movement's far more important than just set shooting because it adds an element to it. Brandon Miller has the most impressive skill set for how he shoots because his level of difficulty is harder. He does it off isolation. So I think he's the best player because he can do it much like, and I'm not comparing him, so please don't misinterpret this. He's not Kevin Durant, but Kevin Durant's ability to shoot over people and create space that isn't there, but make shots and all the same at an unbelievable clip is what Brandon Miller is compared to the rest of this class. Dariq Whitehead and Grady Dick are great spot-up shooters. They catch the ball and they shoot it very efficiently. Their spot-up and catch and shoot, guarded and unguarded, are both very impressive. But they're both 6'7" and tall wings who have limited defensive versatility. Dariq Whitehead, I will preface this, battled a foot injury all year, so I think he's got more athletic upside than people give him credit for, and the numbers give him credit for. And one more shooter I think is worthwhile mentioning is Cam Whitmore. He's someone that dealt with a thumb injury, and his counting stats weren't particularly great, but he shot impressively well off catch and shoots, and he also does pretty well out of the isolation. I think he's worth a top 5-6 pick.
Let's go back to Dariq Whitehead for a second, because his numbers were really interesting. He is in the 28th percentile in transition, so that's a big, huge red flag. He's in the 25th percentile at the rim, so that's a big, huge red flag. He's in the 60th percentiles of pick and roll ball handling. It's like, okay, he didn't do a lot of them, but that's actually pretty good considering his size. And then he's in the 85th percentile spot up, 94th percentile catch and shoot, 93rd percentile catch and shoot unguarded, 71 percentile on 55 attempts on jumper off the drops. Is this just an old Ryan Anderson? Like, that profile to me is like a standstill shooter with no athleticism. But I have a feeling that's not who Dariq Whitehead is.
Yeah, Dariq Whitehead was one of the more decorated high school basketball players in the past 5, 6, 7 years because he was on Montverde with his predecessors being Cade Cunningham, and he started as a freshman 4 straight years on these elite teams. He has a trophy case that many would aspire to having of any sort of, like, even a youth level. Dariq Whitehead, because he played on Duke, there's pluses and minuses. He was put in a huge spotlight with a lot of other talented freshmen. And then he hurt his foot, and he had limited ability to create space early in the year, which I think really and create lift. So I think that hurt his finishing numbers at the rim and ability to isolate and score. I think he's a very intelligent player that's got some functional athleticism. I am a little bit worried about how healthy he'll be because he's had a couple injuries. Shooting the ball, he was phenomenal. Duke made a great rise. At the last 15 games of the season, Duke was in the top 7 in terms of KenPom offensive and defensive efficiency. And that's really, really rare. And especially for a team full of freshmen, I think that coincides nicely with when Dariq Whitehead was healthy. So I think he's a positively impactful player who shoots the ball terrifically, has a chance to be a secondary, maybe a tertiary creator as a, not a point guard, but someone who can facilitate a little bit. And then athletically, I don't think he's anything special in terms of the NBA, but I don't think these numbers are perfectly indicative of the athlete that he is.
All right, we got a problem. I haven't gotten to my golden children of my numbers, and we're done with the show. Can you stick with me for tomorrow's show and get and do a little Friday with me as well to talk about the golden children of my numbers, my loves, and tell me what's wrong with all the guys that actually came out really well with my numbers?
I can talk the NBA draft and Utah Jazz anytime, so
I'll
be there.
Leif Thulin will be back tomorrow on tomorrow's show every day. Let's get with him. YouTube comments, you can hit Leif on Twitter at...
It's just my name, Leif Thulin.
That's pretty easy for you. Go hit that on Twitter. Sorry, I know your email address. I almost gave out your email address there instead. It's all here on Locked On Jazz, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.